Hi everyone, welcome to this lesson. I hope that you're really getting a lot out of this course. For me, learning to listen, pausing, taking a breath before responding to me really influenced how I communicate. And it's still something I have to consciously work at. But once you're aware of it, right, you can start doing it. And so I hope there's some practical things for you to take away from this course. In this lesson, we're going to focus on listening to understand versus listening to respond. Now, let's just have a little revision back to lesson 2, where I introduced you to some theory, right? The communication accommodation theory. And that explained how people adjusted their communication verbally and non-verbally to either converge, so to become more similar, or diverge, emphasize differences. Depending on the social context, the goals of the conversation, and I guess the existing relationships between the conversational partners. Accommodation we discussed was around using behavioral strategies or tactics to consciously or even unconsciously reduce social distance, ideally, or you can be non-accommodative and increase social distance. So to become more or less similar to your conversation partner. And I introduced this theory not because I love a good theory, well, what's wrong with theory, but so we can understand the differences between really listening to respond and to understand in terms that how we adopt our communication behaviors, how we display our communication behaviors to others really influences how people can hear, listen, and respond. And in turn, how we listen, hear, and respond to conversations. So let's look at listening to respond, which is really less accommodative form of listening. This style often reflects divergent communication behavior. The listener maintains their own communication style and focuses on preparing a reply rather than fully engaging and pausing and listening to what the speaker is saying. So it's often about listening while hearing, not truly listening. And while that person's talking, your mind is off in another place thinking, what's my comeback going to be? Or how am I going to defend my position? And it can signal a desire to assert independence or authority. It's kind of less attuned emotionally. It's not really a relational kind of form of listening. And it often displays less empathy and intentiveness. So this might be interrupting or mentally rehearsing a response while the other person is speaking. So in my personal studies, we're studying receiver behavior in speaking up conversations. When we were looking and observing speaking up interactions, nurses in particular tended to listen to fix, which is a form of listening to respond. They were listening to what tasks they could do to help the other person. Now, their motivation was accommodative. They wanted to support the other person. The impact of that behavior, however, was the speaker didn't feel listened to, and they didn't feel heard. And then the nurse receiver was off trying to fix something that was the wrong thing because they didn't actually listen to understand. So well intended, but miscommunication occurred. Listening to understand is more accommodative form of listening, and it reflects convergence. The listener adapts and amends their behavior, so their tone, body language, pace, to align to the speaker, showing genuine interest and empathy. It promotes stronger rapport and trust between communication partners. It demonstrates greater emotional attunement, and it can improve mutual understanding, so reduce miscommunication. So it could be mirroring the speaker's tone, asking clarifying questions, and pausing before responding to ensure full comprehension. So listening to understand is in alignment to those active learning principles. So converging is around active listening, so listening to understand, and diverging when the context doesn't call for it can hinder connection and lead to miscommunication. Diverging behaviors don't have to be intentional, such as the nursing example I gave you, listening to fix. But if you haven't already, go back and do Workplace Conversations, the Essentials course, because in that course, we look and explore this concept of intent versus impact. And so we could be displaying divergent behaviors because we're innately listening to respond rather than listening to understand in our workplace conversations. And although our intent may be good, the impact on the other person can be significant. They don't feel valued, they don't feel heard, they don't feel listened to. That can only, well, it can lead to miscommunication, but it also can impact on a relational and emotional level. So if we want to improve workplace conversations, we need to embrace listening to understand and understanding a little bit of theory about what's convergence and what's divergent and things we can do to support that and aid interpretability and reduce miscommunication are really important.